Welcome to the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast, where we equipped you to more effectively lead your seat at any employer, business, or industry in which you choose to play. Each week, we help you sharpen your leadership acumen by cracking open the playbooks of dynamic leaders who are doing big things in their professional endeavors. And now your host, leadership tactics and organizational development expert, Karan Farrell-Rhodes.
Hello, my superstars. This is Karan, and welcome to another episode of the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast. I am truly over the moon today to have a fantastic guest and an industry that a lot of us don't know from us in the corporate side, don't know a ton about, but we're going to learn more about it today. We're thrilled to have on today's show Mr. Andy Allaway. And Andy is the CEO of Empire Flippers. And Empire Flippers is basically a business broker for online business, but they are the number one place to buy and sell online businesses. They've also been on the Inc. 5000, fastest growing companies for numerous years. They've also gotten international awards, and the list goes on and on. But Andy is really passionate about not only the business, but empowering remote leaders. And he's also the creator and host of The Leadership. It's a YouTube channel dedicated to distilling practical insights tailored specifically for remote executives. So welcome to the podcast, Andy.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Looking forward to it.
Same here. As I mentioned pre-show, I'm just dying to dive deeper and learn more about the business and you and some of your thoughts on your industry and in leadership. But before we do that, we always like to learn just a little bit more about our guests. So for just as much as you feel comfortable, would you give us a sneak peek into your life outside of work?
Yeah, of course. So I live in the south of the UK, about 40 miles west of London, with my wife. I got a 4-year-old boy and a greyhound who is struggling in the uncharacteristic heat we have here at the moment. And yeah, I mean, work keeps me pretty busy, but and parenting and what have you. But the main thing I like to do outside of that is play golf. I'm a golfer, yeah, that's about all I have time for in the week.
It sounds like it, especially with a young family. But you know what? You would be my husband's best friend because he is just addicted to golf. So
It gets like that.
Yeah, that's what he says. I'm a great driver of the golf cart, but I won't say I just hold the spot when we go golfing. He likes to go with his friends that are very competitive. So awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. All right. Well, let's delve into our conversation, Andy, if you don't mind. And first of all, I would love for you to just give a few highlights of milestones of your professional career and then what led you to becoming the CEO of Empire Flippers.
Yeah, sure. So I'll kind of give the cliff notes on my career. I've always been drawn to kind of management roles. And the early part of my career, I worked in IT sales, and I was a fairly average salesperson, but I moved pretty quickly into sales management, and I was a pretty good sales manager. And I was kind of progressing up that, big corporate career track until maybe I hit about 30. And then I just was kind of bored with corporate life, to be honest. So I went traveling for a year. And then I got into kind of building out small websites and monetizing them. Long story short, that's eventually how I came across Empire Flippers. And they were very, very early days. We have 2 US founders who had kind of like moved out to Southeast Asia and were building the business from there. And at the time, I joined as kind of one of our first hires. And at the time, the part of the role was you had to move out and live in Vietnam for the first year. And that's kind of really what sold it for me. I had kind of traveled around Vietnam, loved the country, didn't really want to be in the UK at that point. And so that was start of 2017, joined in the early days. And then we went through a pretty quickly kind of like, as we hired more people, became part of the management team. And I ran operations for kind of the longest stint at the company, which, we have a team that vets businesses before they go on the marketplace and migrates them after we sell them. And that was kind of my area. So formed part of the management team as we were growing. And then, around about 2023, the industry and our business in that industry hit a bit of a sticky patch where we weren't growing anymore. In fact, the business declined that year. And that's the point where I think our founders realized it was time for somebody else to kind of step up and take the reins. And so I've been running the company and really leading a bit of a turnaround over the kind of 2 years since then.
Amazing. Well, you're still standing and to tell the story. So I'll say congratulations on continuing to weather the storm. But I believe, like all industries, you're just having CEOs and their teams are having to rethink how to remain viable for the long term, how things are, evolving and changing. And you're a big testament. You and your team are a big testament to that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that kind of goes into how we got to the point we were in 2023, some outside of the company, some inside of the company. But I can safely say that this moment right now is the most I'm sleeping at any point in that 2 year period. So things are good at the moment.
Excellent. Excellent. Got to get that sleep in.
Mhm.
Well, I know I didn't do Empire Builders justice. So would you mind sharing with the audience a little bit more about what it is to be, say, a business broker of online businesses? What do you all do? And, how do you, bring value to your clients? And it's a two-sided deal. So if you can just share a little bit more, like one level down, to help our listeners understand what you do.
Yeah, of course. So Empire Flippers, we're kind of like a marketplace broker combination. So we have a marketplace where at any time we'll have maybe 150, 160 businesses listed, something like that. And where we really excel, first off, is that we're a vetted marketplace. So there are other marketplaces where anybody can go and list a business, and maybe the numbers are fake, or maybe there's some other stuff that they're covering up. We have a substantial vetting team, and we reject in excess of 90% of the businesses that get submitted to us. So we only list businesses that pass our vetting and that we're kind of confident we can sell. So that obviously makes it a much safer environment for buyers to come and kind of do their due diligence, and they still have to do due diligence, but they don't have to be questioning every number on the listing. We've checked a lot of that stuff. And then also, so that's kind of where we're a fit for buyers. And then on the seller side, a lot of, like you said, this is still an industry that most people are not even that familiar with, right? And so a lot of people are running a successful business, and the majority of what we sell is kind of e-commerce, SaaS, agencies, those type of businesses. But for the most part, sellers have been really deep in building their business, but don't really know a whole lot about how to sell one, right? And so we have a team that will, kind of handhold them through calls with buyers and drawing up agreements and all of this kind of stuff. Like I said, we migrate the businesses after we sell them, so we kind of have a technical team that helps with all of that stuff. That's kind of why it makes sense for sellers to kind of sell their business through us and pay us a fee as a result as well.
Interesting. And it's the sellers who pay you the fee, or is it split between the seller and buyers?
It's the sellers. So when we list a business, we'll kind of agree a list price with the seller. And then we agree, effectively a commission, like a real estate broker, or similar kind of model to that. And we don't have any retainers or anything like that. So if we don't sell your business, we don't get paid anything. And that's why another reason why we're super conscious about only listing things that we think we can do a good deal for sellers on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know when I was researching the company, and looking at some of the listings that were on there, I mean, there was quite a variety, but quite a few that are on Amazon, which and especially I'll just mention in the US. I mean, people live on the Amazon site, and I'm curious what you all see are some of the greatest needs or obstacles when sellers want to sell, of what they have to do to get their businesses ready to sell.
Yeah, that's a really important question. And we will often be working with sellers, 1, 2, 3 years out from when they're actually ready to sell. We're very happy to kind of do these exit planning calls. I think it all boils down to answering the number one question buyers ask, which is what happens when I take the seller out of this business, right? So for a business to be sellable and to demand a good valuation, you kind of have to answer that question on a bunch of different fronts. So, that will be things like having a team in place or processes in place so that the business doesn't depend on the seller doing like 40 hours of the actual operations of the business every week, having well documented processes that a buyer can kind of pick up and things like that. And then thinking ahead of time about getting financials in a good state. Again, this is all stuff that we kind of help with through our vetting process. But yeah, all kind of variations of answering that question basically.
Gotcha. And I'm just curious. So, online businesses frequently have large staffs, or do you find them usually smaller staffs or somewhere in between?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it definitely depends on the size of the business a little bit. So, we sell everything from kind of 50 to 100K list price businesses up to like mid 7, 8 figure businesses on our marketplace. And obviously, the bigger they get, the more likely it is they have substantial teams. But for like the midpoint of that, say like 6, 7 figure businesses, it'll normally be the seller and maybe some contractors or 1 or 2 staff members. They're not normally huge teams, no.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And on the seller side, I'm sorry, on the buyer side, um, are there things that you all do to help prep them for buying, or are they pretty buyer savvy and you spend most of your time with the sellers?
No, I mean, we definitely spend time with both. For sure, buyer savviness is a spectrum. And, we have a lot of very experienced buyers who are, running more kind of institutional money type companies and will be buying assets as part of that. But we also have, a really good base of buyers who are, maybe just high net worth individuals. They have a good paying full-time job and maybe they're looking for a side hustle or maybe they're looking to kind of replace that income. And yeah, we have a lot of resources geared towards helping buyers do due diligence and things like that. Because we want as many deals as possible to go really well for sellers and for buyers. So we do, we have a fiduciary responsibility to get good deals for sellers, but we kind of view ourselves as having a responsibility to increase the chances of just doing good business full stop as much as possible.
That's awesome. Well, one of the things we do like to share on the our episodes, Andy, is the good, bad, and the ugly, of it. And being that CEO, you mentioned there were some tough times you had to help navigate your team through, and basically navigate a turnaround, like you mentioned before. I was wondering if you would mind doing, one click down on that, on, what's the story that you can share, not any, releasing any IP or anything, but, how was that? How do you turn around an established company, and galvanize the team and make very tough decisions, like, if you're needing to trim the staff or rethink the industry. Would love to hear a little bit more about that story so that folks can understand that even CEOs have struggled too, when the industry turns or times turn.
Totally. Yeah, I think if you kind of so if you go back slightly to when times were very, very good yeah, for us was like during COVID. While it was kind of tough for a lot of industries, everything was going online. So all of a sudden, all the businesses that we sell are performing amazing. You also had some kind of stuff specific to our industry. So you mentioned we sell a lot of Amazon e-commerce businesses, which we do. There were these roll-up companies that raised billions and billions to buy literally hundreds of those companies, and we had a lot
Wow.
of them. So like, 2020, 2021 were kind of insane years for us. And as part of that, we scaled up our team incredibly quickly. I will mess the exact numbers up, but let's say, at the start of 2020, maybe we were like 30, 40 people, something like that. And at the start of 2022, we were more like 90.
Oh,
So we'd
wow.
hired a lot of people.
Mhm.
And, that changes the culture in a way that when you're performing as well as we were, you kind of like miss the little signs that maybe there's some cultural breakdown in certain areas. And then, I think in 2023, a lot of it was kind of market driven. You had the inflation and interest rates and all of this stuff that like was very, very good for us previously, was kind of a little more uncertain. But then it really highlighted, once the performance dropped slightly, it highlighted that we had these kind of cultural cracks. And so, that's really kind of the first thing that I did when I took over in mid 2023 was, I bet on the people who were still like culturally on board with the company, and there were some people and there were some leadership mistakes through that period as well, leading up to that. So there were some people who felt rightly aggrieved about certain things. But I felt in terms of like, what I have to do at that moment and give us the best possible chance of coming out the other side was to who are the people that are like still on the team and can be kind of got back on board. So I had that front of mind and we did kind of do some reduction in our team through that period. The one thing I did off the bat was I stacked my leadership team full of people who I knew would run through walls for me. And I like to say I picked my ride or dies over the people who were like resume the best fit for the roles. And that because I knew that things were going to get worse likely before they got better, and they did. So I think that's something I got really right. And then, we just tried to simplify it. Like we haven't done anything that's completely off the wall. What are the core things we need to do well? We need to make sure we're calling buyers and stuff like this, like absolute basics, make sure we're tracking them. And then I just tried to, we got to a point with our planning meetings where each department would have tens and tens of goals and all this different minutia. And I tried to get back to, 80% of what we need to do is nail the day job really well. What's the 20% we're going to work on this quarter that like moves us to that next level? We've just been rinsing and repeating that for 2 years.
Wow. It seems to have worked well. And I'm sure that, when you're in the minutia of it, because the devil's in the details, right? It's important, but that seems like a great formula to stay viable and to keep improving. Always having an eye on continuous improvement, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we've just closed out Q2, obviously, and it was our best quarter in several years. Most deals sold, most offers accepted. We kind of comfortably hit target, and so yeah, it's so far so good.
That's fantastic. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
How hard is it to navigate the business laws in different countries of where these businesses are founded? Is that easy or a tough thing for you all to do?
So in our area, it tends to be reasonably straightforward because the vast majority of deals that we do, definitely 90% plus, are asset sales rather than company sales. So it's normally one company acquiring the assets of the business, the website, the different accounts and things like that. And so, both sides typically will have lawyers involved in purchase agreements and stuff like that. But it being an asset sale does tend to simplify things a decent amount.
Interesting. Very interesting. Well, let me switch and turn to some of the things that you're doing and your thoughts on leadership and some of the latest passions that you have in this space. I had mentioned earlier that you have your own, I think, YouTube show now, and would love to learn, more about your passion about leadership and who you're, striving to help support and give insights to.
Yeah, I think so. I'm very passionate about online business. I talk about it a lot. But I am more passionate about leadership and kind of running teams like that. That's kind of the common thread, even pre-Empire Flippers, through everything that I've done. I like, for me, like leadership, and particularly now running a company, it's like, you place little bets and you try to do things with leverage, and then you kind of see how they pan out, and that kind of, like little psychological experiments is kind of exciting. And I think, I would say over the last few years, my leadership style, or like the way I think about leadership, has kind of evolved, because the kind of default that you read everywhere is things like, hire good people and get out of their way. And it's this giving of ownership is always the best way to lead. And that is my natural way to lead. I think if you would have asked me, 3 years ago, I would have parroted that. I would have said the same thing. But I actually think leadership is much more situational specific these days. And I've seen that through the turnaround that we've been through. That there was a time where Ben Horowitz has this great kind of wartime CEO versus peacetime CEO piece, right? And I had a period where I had to be the wartime CEO, right? Which is, hey, this is the way we're doing things. You create absolute clarity. People feel that you're not giving them enough kind of ownership and responsibility, but it's more important that things get done the way that kind of I need them to be done right now. And
Right.
that's naturally a little less comfortable for me. I don't, it's not how I like managing. But yeah, that's kind of the evolution I've been through with it. So that was a kind of a long-winded answer to your question. Don't know if I quite
No,
nailed
that's a
it.
great question. It's a great question because what we found, I've been passionate about leadership my whole career, obviously, and do a lot of human capital advisory for companies now. And what we do is we do help like the C-suite understand there are times you have to, or it's a good idea to change your leadership style for the sake of the now.
Mm,
Um, but you will naturally go back to what's comfortable for you when times are good, and
sure.
that's an effective leader, and that's okay. It may not feel good, but that might be what it'll take for you to overcome the next obstacle. But what's critical is to help people understand that now's a time of intense focus. I'm going to be focused on this. I might be micromanaging for a second or two, but it's necessary for the business. And I'm trying to keep us in survival, save your job. You go on in your own words, but
Mm.
it's okay to do. And I love that you shared that, that it's not your most comfortable style, but it was something that you had to do for the time and kind of get through it. And
Yeah, I think
I'm,
sorry.
go ahead.
Yeah, I think
No,
the
go
kind
ahead.
of the thing that I told myself, back then was, it's okay if I fail because I was just wrong, right? Like I placed the wrong bets, I went after the wrong strategy. It's totally unacceptable if I'm wrong because that strategy didn't get carried out properly, right? Like I didn't manage the
Right,
implementation of it well enough.
right. You're absolutely right. I'm curious, where what advice would you give to more early in career professionals or young leaders as they are, I won't say climb the corporate ladder per se, but as they're really trying to grow their careers? What things do you advise them to keep in mind? If you had like one or two things that you wanted to leave with the world of advice, what would those be?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind is that, like anything else, leadership is a skill, right? And some people may be kind of a little more naturally gifted in it, but everybody can learn leadership, and there's more resources out there talking about leadership than you could kind of need in a lifetime. So I
Yeah.
think again, it's having a growth mindset to the fact that sometimes people will say, "Well, I'm not a leader or I'm not a people person," but everybody can take steps in that direction.
Yeah.
Um, and then I think, yeah, the way to lead, I think, is to identify kind of the other people in the business who are going to be leaders. One of the things that gives me the kind of the most pride in kind of my time at Empire Flippers is spotting the people who maybe do have the capacity to be leaders and want to, and helping to nurture that. And
Mhm.
so I guess to answer your question about someone who's early on is find somebody maybe a bit further on in that journey and kind of show them that you're the person that could be the next version of them or the next leader in the business, and you'll
Mhm.
likely find them wanting to kind of help you advance on that front.
Absolutely. No, that sounds right. Um, I'd love to switch back to Empire Flippers for just a second because it is a very unique industry for, I'll say, a lot of our listeners, because a lot of our listeners are corporate individuals and leaders. I'm curious where you see this industry going in the next, I'd say 1 to 2 years? How do you think the future of online businesses are going to be? What trends are you kind of spotting out there right now?
Hmm. Yeah, so I think, the it's not telling any secrets that the world will just continue getting more and more online. I think, every kind of stat is kind of telling you that AI probably puts that on steroids a little bit. And typically in our business of selling these assets, we're typically like a year or two behind whatever is kind of big at the time. And so for example, there was a very, very big trend of building businesses on Amazon and third-party sellers and stuff like that. And then that
Mm-hmm.
always kind of filters through to kind of us a bit later.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of like where we're placing our bets, like still very much on e-commerce. I think e-commerce just continues to evolve and grow, both on Amazon, but also off. I would bet that in 2 years there will be more Shopify stores than there are today, and these
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think that changes. And if anything, what's kind of exciting in our space is I think some of the, you asked about kind of like typical team size earlier. I think some
Mhm.
of the AI and the automation stuff, which is, every week there's something crazier at the moment.
I
If
know, right?
anything, it just means that one person's ability to run a very sizable business with like minimal team or maybe even no team,
Mhm.
just I think is going to increase. So yeah, I think it's still, a very exciting time in what we do.
I think it is too, and I can see your industry and the work that you all do as business brokers really expanding um,
Mm.
greatly, easily based on trends that we're seeing anyway. But we'll keep our fingers crossed for you all
Yeah.
as well. Well, Andy, out of our conversation, it's so easy to understand why you had selected the answer you did for our signature question for our guests. And for my new listeners out there, you may not know, but our firm did a lot of research on high performing leaders and companies and what it took that what it was that they did differently in executing versus 99% of the population. And out of the research, there were 7 big buckets of activities. We call them tactics, but buckets of activities that they use to help be successful. And Andy was so kind to share that having a drive for results was one out of the 7 that really popped for him. And just so you all know, all 7 are equally as important, and you use them at different times. But usually, there's one that kind of really resonates with you. And for Andy, it was drive for results. And the way we define it is having a drive for results is being, very tenacious about making sure your end goals are ultimately achieved, even if you have to pivot or make changes along the way. But it's just, taking those baby steps, staying forward, making progress, and still getting to the, end goal. So curious minds really want to know, Andy, why did having a strong drive for result really resonate with you?
Yeah, I think you kind of set it up nicely, which is, I think success in anything in life starts with where are you trying to get to, right? And even in
Mhm.
business, that could be a million different things. Some people are trying to grow unicorns, some people are trying to build good lifestyle businesses, give their team kind of flexible lives, stuff like that. So I think you start with the end goal. And then again, you place the bets that you think kind of get you to that place. And then you just, I go back to, if the bets are wrong, then you can pivot and you can change them. But if the bets are right and then you don't execute against them, like it's just criminal and you never get the right information to adjust. And so that's kind of how I think about our business is like long-term vision. And then we do the kind of the 12-week year planning. I'm not a big fan of annual goals because I
Yeah.
think, it's February and you're not on pace, but you think you'll catch up later in the year, and that just kind of carries on the whole way through. So we try to
Right.
get hyper focused on the 12-week goals. And then at the end of it, did we do them? Did we not do them? Did they do what we think we were going to do? If not, let's adjust. And like, that's how my simple brain thinks about business.
Well, I love it. Sometimes the simpler is better. What is it? Keep it simple, stupid, or
For
what the
sure.
phrase is. But yeah, keeping it simple is better, and it's easier for understanding and communicating to the team too about
Hmm.
what they should prioritize to help the business, stay and remain strong. So that is awesome. Well, Andy, we're going to have, of course, your detailed bio, links to where to find Empire Flippers and other information in our show notes. But I always love to give time to our guests on the air to share where folks can find you all. So if they're curious about where to find you or get more information about Empire Flippers, where can folks look?
Cool. Yeah. So absolutely empireflippers.com is the best place for stuff about the company. I'm pretty active personally on LinkedIn. So that tends to be a good place to get me. And, I talk about some Empire Flippers stuff. I talk about some kind of stuff more to do with my leadership show on podcast, on YouTube. So yeah, LinkedIn, just Andy Allaway on LinkedIn is a good place.
All right. Well, if you didn't catch all those real quick, everybody, if you were driving, no worries. Just hit the show notes link and you can find the actual live links there as well. But definitely check out Andy and his team. I personally did quite a bit of research on them and it was just absolutely fascinating. So that's why I really was so excited to have him on the show today. So thank you so much, Andy, for the gift of your time and sharing your insights with our listeners today.
Pleasure. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Awesome. And thank you too, listeners, for the gift of your time as well. Because as I always say, I know there are literally millions of other podcasts you can be listening to, and we do not take your patronage lightly at all. All that we ask is you like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform of choice and share our podcast with just one friend, because by doing so, it will help us all to better lead at the top of our games. Thanks so much and see you next week. And that's our show for today. Thank you for listening to the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast, where we help you lead your seat at any employer, business, or industry in which you choose to play. You can check out the show notes, additional episodes, bonus resources, and also submit guest recommendations on our website at leadyourgamepodcast.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn by searching for the name Karan Rhodes, with Karan being spelled Karan. And if you like the show, the greatest gift you can give would be to subscribe and leave a rating on your podcast platform of choice. This podcast has been a production of Shockingly Different Leadership, a global consultancy which helps organizations execute their people, talent development, and organizational effectiveness initiatives on an on-demand project or contract basis. Huge thanks to our production and editing team for a job well done. Goodbye for now.